Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this afternoon, I'm going to make noises talking about silence. So silence is a subject, but it's only a word, but pointing at where there's sound is no longer the main object of attention. Like thoughts are sounds, and emotions speak to us of love and hate, like and dislike. Memories are images in the mind. All our languages, well, whatever language we speak, it's images created by human beings into the silence. They arise and cease not from another sound, not from something else, but from the silence of the present reality, which is we call here and now. So we notice that people talk about when they meditate, they start thinking, and they want silence. They want to shut up the mind and just dwell in the resonance of silence. But even that wishing like that, desires for silence, it's still words, isn't it? It's filled with this wish for something that you don't recognize, you don't realize, but which is always here and now. So many of us have struggled with this kind of conundrum, because we are highly conditioned to think. And, modern education is all about acquiring knowledge, acquiring views and opinions, forming thoughts, imagination, about imagining all kinds of things that, whether they're reasonable or fictional, fantasies or images of just flowers and trees. We imagine, we project our images onto the flowers and trees. The flowers and trees don't say they're trees, or flowers don't say they're flowers. It's we who speak English or whatever language equivalent to those words, we project onto it. So we want to know what's the species of the tree, the flower, what's the name of the flower? And we think we know something about life when we have a lot of information, and we acquired all the biological terminology, medical terminology, scientific thoughts and views, spiritual ones, metaphysical theories, or just rubbish. Our minds can be just filled with nonsense and foolishness, or we dwell in a dark world of anger, hatred, and aversion. It's all a created state that we helplessly kind of create out of ignorance, not understanding Dhamma. not having a clue what Dhamma is, then we create a whole world, a universe of imagined perceptions that we believe is our reality. So thinking is a great gift in one way, but it's also a curse, because we are victims of our own thinking process. We've often wondered, why can't life be fair? Why can't we just get along with each other? Why do we have to go to war? Why do men and women have difficulty understanding each other? Why do we have border problems and neighbor problems? And why can't we just get along and love each other? So these are wishes and desires. We like the systems we live in, the people we love and appreciate to be fair and just, reasonable, sensible, practical, to understand us as our egos, to respect our egos as what we really are. But what is the ego? What is a personality? And so we identify with him. I'm an extrovert or an introvert. We have various names that we apply to different characteristics that individuals have. And the ego is generally is a created form. It's a form, it's not ultimate reality. The personality is a creation on all of us. We have different personalities, and some personalities we find inspiring, other personalities we find depressing. In our own mind, we can be inspired by inspiring thoughts and images. We can be depressed by negative ones. So we're helpless victims of our own creations, and we don't know what we're doing. And that's why the world is the way it is, why there's wars in Ukraine, and why there's starvation and petty kind of corruptions and in democratic governmental systems and disagreements and anger and hatred arising between married couples, family life, because personalities are different, and we would like to find a partner who really understands me as a person and respects me as a person is another wish that we might treasure, hoping in the future to find the right one and live happily ever after in marital bliss. But this never really happens because these are based on illusions, on ignorance. So the Buddha's teachings was pointing to a way to get beyond ignorance, to not just be a helpless victim with just becoming educated and reasonable, psychologically normal and presentable and agreeable to the world, but how to get to the very source, the silence that is always here and now, never separate, but we don't notice it, except in rare moments maybe. So when we have a lot of noise, a lot of confusion, we want silence. So we we demand sometimes silence, because this is a word that we can use to command people to stop talking, making noises. But even if everybody stops talking and the cacophonous noises disappear, the thinking mind still can go on. Because thinking is a creation, it's not a person, whatever. That's why I keep saying that you're not what you think. You can't find yourself as an object, a described object. You might identify with a certain view of your personality, or we have various opinions about others' personalities that we can share. We can say, he's an introvert, she's an extrovert, she has a good personality, he doesn't have any personality, he's bland, he's not interesting, she's very lively, interesting. So we describe each other in these kind of words, adjectives, that we personally create in our mind and believe. So the world is a created state. And then, is there a God that creates the world? So we might believe there is, that God created the world. So that's another belief. Like God is a belief. The world that we believe God created is another belief. It's a perception. So what is, in Pali scriptures, there is the uncreated. And if there was not the uncreated, there'd be no escape from the created. So how do we escape from the created? We can't do it as a person. It's impossible for personalities to uncreate themselves. It's not annihilation, the desire to not have a personality or change your personality is still a creation that the individual clings to and imagines as their reality. But if there was not the uncreated, then try to imagine the uncreated, make an image. Try to, with the best kinds of superlative terms you can possibly imagine in the present, and you can't do it. The intellect is limited in this way. It can't imagine the uncreated. So in the Nibbana Sutta, the Buddha said there is the uncreated, and that's what we begin to take an interest in. The created we can sum up quite easily in the teachings that all conditions are impermanent and not self. So that covers everything you create, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, reasonable, crazy, nonsense, intelligent, the best or the worst. It's all creation. So whatever you think is a creation. So if we only know how to, we're not that we deliberately do it, we're just conditioned to create endless thoughts. Emotions arise through various other conditions. In a world that we live in, that we create individually through our conditioning, through our what we call our karma, our individual tendencies habit patterns, cultural biases, racial biases, prejudices of all sorts. These are all creations that individuals create and identify with. So like with vipassana, meditation is in looking into the way things are. It's not telling you, can't, it's not trying to say you have to believe in the uncreated. So there's no demand that you believe in something you can't imagine. Even the word God is personified in modern life as a kind of patriarchal grandfather figure or some powerful dictator or one that creates everything and knows everything. So these are attempts out of our conditioning to find peace and happiness in belief in some kind of benevolent deity. But is that what we are really experiencing here and now? Or what are we experiencing here and now is silence. Silence is here and now. It's not, it has no conditions, no qualities. But it's very powerful once you begin to recognize it. So when we talk about enlightenment or getting beyond suffering and non-suffering, then the whole emphasis of the Buddhist teaching is pointing to this uncreated, unformed, unconditioned reality that is here and now, that we're not conditioned to recognize. So when we imagine silence and long for silence, we're caught in holding to a very maybe peaceful concept of and wish for silence. But what is it? If it's unconditioned, is silence conditioned? Is it cultural? Is it personal? Is it good or bad, right or wrong? So investigating, we start looking inward rather than trying to just find a peaceful, silent place to live in. Because many of us have wasted our time in monastic life looking for the perfect place that is completely silent, where we aren't encumbered with noisy people or unpleasant sounds. So we can spend a lifetime searching the planet for a nice silent place to live that doesn't upset me or confuse me. But no matter if you do find the kind of ideal silent refuge on planet Earth, you've still got ignorance, not understanding the way things are. So even in the silence that you may be experiencing through the lack of contact with sensory objects, is still the basic delusion is still there. The ego, the cultural conditioning, and maybe we can, through arranging our life in such a way, we can avoid having to think a lot or be encumbered with a lot of unpleasant social situations or noisy cities or noisy neighbors. But then we're stuck with the basic illusion of a separate self, and we've developed this Vipuva desire to get rid of the world, to to get away from suffering, to find peace and happiness by a hermetic life, by training the mind to concentrate on refined objects, to attain blissful states through restraint, through one-pointed concentration on objects, through silence alone. But the Buddha was pointing to the source of all the source of suffering, the causes of it. And it's very clearly stated. It's not a secret teaching that only the spiritually advanced can know about. But it's available. It's been available for thousands of years, open to the world in general, to all of us. So it's kind of inspiring now to see with the modern technology, the amount of interest in these Buddhist teachings, or teachings that transcend the worldly conditioning, that point to it, that direct our attention beyond just the habit patterns that we've acquired, whether they're good or bad habits. And of course, this is on internet. You can find all kinds of meditation videos, and various teachers are teaching about mindfulness, awareness, consciousness. And this is important, because this is where we find the end of suffering, not through finding an ideal partner or a perfect situation to live in, but having recognized for oneself the stillness, the silence that's natural, it's uncreated. Because talks like this can inspire you, and hopefully it does, encourage you. But then the point is to look inward, rather than at various teachers or teachings, but to notice, begin to awaken to the way things are, that all conditions are impermanent. And can you sustain a separate personal perception of yourself as, a good person or a bad person, or how old are you, whether you're male or female, whether you're black or white? These are constant references to what we cling to and hold to as our reality, and what we strongly defend or justify, or form biases and prejudices by clinging to these perceptions. And we begin to recognize, to awaken to the fact that we're clinging to perceptions, that perceptions are very unstable and changing, impermanent, and non-self. So what is it that is aware of perception? If the personality is nothing but a collection of perceptions, and the sensory world that we call the real world, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, what we think, what we've been conditioned to believe, if it's all perceptions, perceptions are impermanent and not self. They're anatta, not self. They're not a separate. There's no separate entity that has any permanent quality. So the personalities arise and cease according to conditions. So we have like being a senior monk. Then when you get to be called Ajahn or teacher, you acquire some kind of another personality, another perception to identify with, or a junior monk, or a Siladhara, or an Anagarika. Or we say, oh no, she's just a lay person. And then what a lay person. And so the mind is stuck in these perceptions that are fantasies, that are illusions, they're conventions that can be used, but they're not reality. So beyond being an Ajahn, being a lay person, a nun or a monk or anything, what do we share in common at this moment that is non-personal, that is uncreated, unformed, unconditioned? What do we share with all conditioned forms, with the animal world, with the birds, with the insects, with the squirrels, with all forms that have been created and arise and cease, are born and die? What is it that unites us, that is the uncreated, unformed, unconditioned? So this is an important question to ask yourself. What is it that is aware of the perceiving ability? Can one perception perceive another perception? So on, say, personalities clash because they're different. We hold to different ways of perceiving ourselves. If I've always got to be considered Ajahn Sumedho, even under all conditions, am I always Ajahn Sumedho, even when I'm asleep in my kuti? Are you always the same person when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're being approved of or disapproved of? And with awareness, mindfulness, you're aware that it changes. Your personality will change according to praise and blame, success or failure. And what is aware of this? What is aware of how the personality changes? When you're being praised, you feel uplifted or happy. Or when you're being blamed for something you haven't done, you feel indignant, angry. And then with mindfulness or awareness, we're aware that I feel very angry, upset, misunderstood, unappreciated when I'm being blamed for something I haven't done, or being blamed for things I've done. And when I get titles and accolades and approval and respect, I feel like this. What is aware of feeling like this with approval or disapproval? Because there's certainly conscious awareness, whatever the conditions, how much they change for the better or for the worse. So this is what we begin to recognize. It's awakening to our true nature, which is not personal. It's not like my true nature as Ajahn Sumedho. is like this. It's the Dhamma, the universal reality of the way things are. All conditions are impermanent. All Dhamma is not personal. Sape Dhamma anatta, we chant in Pali. So if we're not people or persons, what are we? And this is what we're encouraging you to really question, not to just believe and adopt Buddhist teachings and just believe them, but they're practical teachings. They're to be investigated, to be explored, to be realized individually for yourselves. So silence is unitive. When we, even in the noise and cacophony of life, this year they're planning building projects, more building projects here at Amaravati. There's going to be a lot more noise, mechanical noise. And then I can't stand it, can't bear, I have to go to another place while these building projects are taking place. Or I remember as a junior monk, monks advised me not to go to a certain branch monastery because they're building a sala and they're making a lot of noise. So I say, well, I'm not going there because they're building projects. I'm going to another place. So I did, and after my first vasa, first pansa with Luang Por Chah, I went to this place, Phupek Mountain in Sukarnakorn district of Thailand, northeast Thailand. And so I thought, Wat Bapong, there's so much doing all the time, a schedule to keep, and I wanted to have more of a reclusive life, like a hermit, being out in nature, away from the social contacts with others in some perfect situation. So I thought Phupek Mountain would be the perfect situation. I'd visited there before I even went to Wat Pong. And Phupek is in the Phupan Range across northeast Thailand. So it's the highest peak in that range of mountains. And it has ruins of an old Cambodian Khmer, I think it was some kind of chedi or palace of some sort. It's just in ruins of like an Angkor Wat, that era of history. So it had a kind of romantic image of these ruined temples and the highest peak in the Phupan Range, beautiful views of the valley below. I went with two other monks, Thai monks. And then the Bindabat was really quite demanding, because you climb to the top of this mountain every day. You go down at dawn. You go down this steep mountain slope with rickety stairs, wooden stairs, part way down, and then you wait at the base of Phupek Hill and wait for villagers to come and offer food. And then you have to go back, climb up the top of this mountain again, and you get back about sometimes 11 o'clock, just in time to eat your meal before 12. Well, I didn't mind all that, really. I mean, I was physically fit, and the challenge of, the physical exertion quite appreciated. So I didn't complain about that. But one of the monks that lived with me on the top of the mountain, I didn't like. And so I spent a lot of time in my kuti thinking negative thoughts about this monk. And then a windstorm came and nearly blew my kuti off the cliff. And then I had caught malaria and had to be carried down the mountain by village men and lie under a tin shed in the hot season with all these little flies buzzing around, crawling in my ears and nose, and if I opened my mouth, they'd fly in there. High fever. This is what I was looking for peace and silence, the perfect situation. But life is like this. It's full of little flies and irritating insects, and this is the planet Earth is like this. Human society is like this. Nobody, there's always somebody that irritates you, that you don't like or don't agree with. Then malaria, unwanted disease, or COVID-19, this pandemic, nobody wants it. So out of all this sensory experience that we identify with, we have certain ambitions and ideals about how it should be, but this is the way it is. People fight and get along and don't get along. They quarrel over boundaries, national boundaries, racial problems, gender problems, sexual problems, endlessly. These are conditions that I'd strongly identify with. Then once we hold to these identities, then we are always opposed to those who don't agree with it. So life is always a sense of opposition. There's always a threat, some kind of danger, some kind of evil force, some kind of problem, crises, issues that arise in the conditioned realm. So out of wisdom, we begin to see that the world is like this. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to get world peace as an ideal, as you wish it were ideally. Or you're not even going to get a peaceful mind just by sitting for hours in meditation, trying to be quiet and silent, but through awakening to natural silence that is uncreated. Even in the midst of the noise. And that's the challenge with Luang Por Chah. I remember recognized when I spent 6 months on Pupek Mountain, and then I went back to Wat Pah Pong to enter the Pansa there. And I was so glad to get back there. And Luang Por Chah had the wisdom to let me experiment with this desire to be a hermit and live in nature alone in some kind of imagined idyllic situation. Because I realized that with all my wishes for this perfect physical place, beautiful spot, that malaria still exists there, and nasty little flies fly around you, and cyclones can come, strong winds can blow. Somebody comes that you find annoying or unpleasant to be around. It's like, so trying to stop everybody from contacting me. So as alms mendicants, we're dependent on others. The Buddha made this decided very clearly that we were not to just become hermits living on mountaintops or in caves separate from the society, but always connected to the society, to the village or the city or whatever. So the challenge for all of us is to recognize the silence here, because it's here. When we stop being averse to the noises or conditions that we're experiencing in the present, when we let go, we don't get rid of the noise or the annoying situations that we find ourselves in. We're not trying to run away or deny or find a better place, but we begin to recognize the silence that's always here. While the noise, while the crises, while the problems arise and cease, come and go and change. Like we've just finished a 3-month winter's retreat. But during the winter's retreat, was it all that peaceful for every one of you? Because we have to live, even as a hermit, isolated in a cave. We still have these conditioned thoughts, language, images, memories, views and opinions that arise and cease. And it's our willingness to recognize that we're not any of these things. We're not a thing. We're not somebody or something. So things, are created, they're conditioned, they're sankharas. Bodies are sankharas. And all sankharas are impermanent, sape sankhara anicca. So these two basic teachings of the Buddha, sape sankhara anicca, sape dhammanada, they're brilliant ways of examining life, investigating the realities that we find ourselves living with. And you find that nothing is real. No thing is very real. Because its very nature is to arise and cease, to appear and disappear, to manifest, demanifest. But what is with us, even at the top of Pupek Mountain, or in a busy day at Wat Pah Pong, or during working periods in Amaravati, in Chithurst, or any place else, is the silence where all these conditions arise and cease. So there is the escape, because there is the unborn, uncreated. And that's apparent here and now. Like in all these years of monastic life, this is what I've realized. The unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned is the reality of here and now. It's silent, doesn't have a language. It has no quality. It's not about heaven, being blissed out in heaven, because the conditions still operate according to their nature, to their karma, the body still gets old. Diseases still can manifest in these forms. Conditions change. There's generosity, there's frugality, there's the praise and blame, peace and war on the worldly level. But we're not any of these things anymore. That's just the way things move and change according to what we call karma, cause and effect. So then the true nature that we all long for and aspire to is not something high up there in heaven or some remote, refined conscious state, but apparent here and now. So in a monastery, because monasteries have a beginning, they'll have an ending eventually. They go through changes. In December, Ajahn Kepali, the abbot of Wat Nananachat in Ubon in Thailand, is opening a new temple, beautiful new temple in Wat Pa Nananachat. And I'm the one that first started this what we call Wat Pa Nananachat in 1974, I think. And it was just a burial ground for the village of Bumai village. It's supposed to be a haunted forest, and it had nothing. It didn't have a well or no electricity. It was just a kind of small forest outside a village. And that was like 50 years ago or so, and now it's become a very famous monastery with a beautiful marble temple that will be opened in December. And I like to think of it as, in the early days of settling in it, before it was even named Wat Pa Nananachat. Wat Pa Nananachat is the Thai name, like Wat Pa means forest monastery, and Nananachat means international, because it was deliberately designed for teaching non-Thai speakers Dhamma, meditation. Because at that time, 1974, there were so many Westerners coming to Wat Pa Pong. And then I was always involved in helping to translate Luang Por Chah's teachings into English, and so Luang Por Chah had this idea of establishing a separate monastery for non-Thai speakers. So that's what I did. That was in 1974. So in 2022, they'll open this beautiful temple. It's now a well-established monastery. They've expanded the acreage of the property. And so it's changed just from a few years, few decades. It's from a village burial ground to an international center for teaching Dhamma. So that's one feels respect for that and joy in the fact that one didn't know how it was going to work. What the point of it was, if anybody really be interested, and or how long it would last. And so I was there 2 years, and then I came to England, to Hampstead. So then it's had various, tomorrow Ajahn Jayasaro is visiting, and he was one of the, we became an abbot later on. Ajahn Pasano was abbot of the monastery before him, and so it goes on, handed from one abbot to another. And that's the incessant changingness, impermanence of phenomena. You can't sustain Wat Banana Chat as it originally was with Grassroof Sala and just a simple life as I kind of imagined it would be, into an international center for ordaining as monks and practicing meditation. But someday Wat Banana Chat will disappear too, so will Amravati, because that's the nature of conditioned phenomena. But that's not the point. It's not about sustaining conditioned phenomena so that everything lasts forever, because that will be a very disappointing wish and desire. So in the Buddha's teaching, all conditions are impermanent, so this prepares us for the change that we individually experience through our bodies. It's like this, being old. Old age is like this. And even though when I was young, I could empathize, I could more or less sympathize with the elderly, but I didn't know what it's like to be elderly till this body became old. But am I really this elderly body, this old body? Is this all I am? And when I die, what's left? Be cremated. People will want to keep my relics maybe, and all kinds of memorabilia arise from the death of a monk. So people can fight over the ashes of a Kuba Ajahn who was cremated. Relics can be such an attachment and belief that relics are some real person in the past, Buddha relics, and all the time, we give so much importance to the past, to the Buddha, the historical Buddha, Gautama the Buddha. But what is Gautama the Buddha right now is a perception that we've acquired. It's a good perception, it's inspiring. But was Gautama the Buddha really pointing to himself as a refuge? The memory of a dead saint that we believe in. It's certainly, it's better to believe in the Buddha than to believe that nothing matters and life is pointless and meaningless. It's better to, it's more comforting to believe in a benevolent deity, a God, because it's comforting as a to the individual person to believe in something benevolent, good and kind and perfect. But what is benevolent, good and kind and perfect in the present moment is the silence that is here and now. That's all forgiving, where all karma ceases, that is truly peaceful, blissful, and perfect. So I offer this as a reflection.